Because if someone is that
that's
good...
unlikely.
It's not unlikely. It happens quite often.
What are the strategies that Joe Rogan uses to tell the richest man in the world that he's wrong? Elon Musk is incorrectly declaring that he could easily beat Mark Zuckerberg in a fight for the sole reason that he is bigger than him. Due to the power imbalance between Joe Rogan and Elon Musk, Joe needs to be extremely careful and diligent in how he goes about confronting Elon and telling him that he is wrong. What are the 6 strategies that Rogan implements before being justified in directly confronting Elon Musk?
And then someone on Twitter at the time said, hey, you should fight Zuck. And I said, well, I'm willing to fight if he is. And then Italy actually was willing to let us use the Colosseum. So then I was like, well, can't turn that down, you know? And then I was like, well, if it's going to be in the Colosseum, we're not like, I like UFC and everything, but we don't have like tons of ads and UFC branding on the Colosseum because it's a historical, play. It's a it's a place. And then Zuck pulled out. Use the pull-out method.
So he pulled out.
Elon shares that Italy was ready to let him and Zuckerberg use the Colosseum to fight. Elon has previously said that he would fight Zuckerberg under any conditions. So what is confusing here to the audience and to Joe is that when Elon starts to describe where the plan went wrong, he refers to himself as providing an objection to the plan when he says, well, if it's going to be in the Colosseum, we can't have tons of ads on the Colosseum like the UFC does. And then Elon says, because of that, Zuckerberg pulled out. Which confuses the audience, and especially Joe, because Elon is the one who provided the objection. So the implication would be that Elon pulled out, not Zuckerberg.
And then Zuck pulled out. Use the pull-out method.
So he pulled out of it? He pulled out of it?
Yeah.
Oh. What was the narrative? What'd you hear, Jamie?
I don't remember.
Elon laughs after he tells his own joke, and we notice that Joe doesn't laugh with him anymore. There is now a point Joe wants to confirm because he potentially doesn't agree with Elon. He says, so he pulled out of it? And then he repeats in an intentionally higher tone, so he pulled out of it? Joe feels that Elon is incorrect here, so he implements his first strategy of utilizing a non-threatening tone. What does the utilization of this higher pitch accomplish? The deeper and louder we raise our voice, the more authoritative our message is. And so when we employ the opposite strategy, we come across less threatening. Also, the more direct we are with our communication, the more authoritative we are perceived as. Joe Rogan checks Elon in a strategic manner, not only in his indirect messaging, asking a question instead of declaring it outright, but he sends the indirect message in a manner that is intentionally non-threatening. Joe then looks to Jamie for support in his confusion, but Jamie realizes that this is the richest man in the world and he wants no stake in this fight, so he quickly says, I don't remember. Someone who truly didn't remember would take at least a few seconds to think before conceding, I really don't remember. Jamie's quickness in his surrender reveals to us that he wants no part in this. Joe Rogan realized that if he needs to correct Elon Musk moving forward, he needs to be extra strategic because he is going to have to do it on his own.
He accused me of not being serious. And I said, look, listen, at the end of the day, if I'll fight you any place, anywhere, under any rules.
Ooh.
Zuck, that's what I said.
Joe Rogan knows who said it, but he says who to Elon because he wants Elon to know that there is disalignment with what he is proclaiming and the objection that he previously provided.
So I'm happy to fight him in a house, on a mouse, with a louse. We'd go full Dr. Seuss here.
Now, how much time?
Joe realizes he is on his own. He rubs his chin and then his hand goes to his neck. He knows he needs to approach this carefully.
I'll just use I've got my patented walrus move. I just lie on him.
Walrus move?
Well, walrus doesn't need martial arts training.
Right.
Because it's really big. Right. You don't want to go wrestling a walrus.
Right.
The first time Elon mentions the walrus move, Joe Rogan goes along with it and finds it funny because he believes Elon's joking. However, once Elon starts to provide reasoning behind why his walrus move would work, Joe starts to disagree internally. In order for Joe to show Elon that he disagrees, Joe implements his second strategic strategy of agreeing directly while disagreeing indirectly. Joe Rogan agrees with Elon by saying, right, 3 times. Each time he agrees with Elon technically and says, right, His indirect disagreement through his tone and pace of speech becomes progressively more authoritative. Although it is seen in a small way here, when we slow our rate of speech, we are viewed as more powerful because it demands more of our counterparty's time than if we were to speak quickly, therefore implying that what we are saying has authority behind it. Rogan's use of making his indirect disagreement more authoritative as Elon continues is Joe's way of strategically and respectfully motioning to Elon that he is getting closer and closer to this turning into a direct disagreement.
You don't want to go wrestling a walrus.
Right.
Because he's going to roll on you.
Have you ever rolled with someone who's much smaller than you that does jujitsu?
Yes.
Lex. Yeah.
Yeah. No, I did 10 years of martial arts.
How much have you trained personally?
I did for a decade of it.
Well, you did a lot of karate, right?
I did
judo,
kai, kushinkai, karate.
Yeah.
So now that Joe has hinted twice at a coming disagreement, once Elon keeps going, we now see Rogan feel justified in progressing to the third strategy, which is the beginning of questioning. Rogan begins to utilize this tactic because he wants to allow Elon to come to the correct conclusion on his own. What Joe Rogan wants to avoid right now is taking on the role of the teacher, because he does not want to assume a position of power over Elon. So in order for Joe to avoid putting himself into a position of power, he focuses on asking Elon the right questions, hoping to give Elon the opportunity to come to the correct conclusion on his own without Joe having to tell him in front of everyone. After Joe asks how much Elon has personally trained, Elon says over a decade. Rogan then mentions that you did a lot of karate, right? Because karate is often seen as the weakest martial art, Rogan mentions this to Elon in order to indirectly emphasize his growing disagreement with him.
I think I'd be decent. I did martial arts competitions when I was a teenager.
Really? Interesting. So look at you, George St. Pierre, Elon, John Danaher, the great master.
Rogan says, really interesting, in disbelief, because why would someone with such extensive MMA knowledge think they could instantly beat another person just because they are bigger than them? We now begin to see Rogan deploy his fourth strategy, which is that of building an evidence-based story that indirectly supports his position. Rogan does this in another attempt to get Elon to come to the realization on his own.
That's why they have weight categories.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
We see Joe Rogan agree that weight categories do serve a purpose, but Joe is still tasked with communicating to Elon that just because you are bigger than someone does not mean that you will beat them.
Did you get a chance to talk to Danaher at all? The guy on the left? That guy's fascinating.
Yeah, no,
Do you know his history?
No, he's from New Zealand or something?
He was a professor of philosophy at Columbia.
Okay.
And fell in love with jiu-jitsu.
Okay.
I mean, fell in love with it to the point where he was sleeping on the mats and teaching all day long. He's an obsessive. He is a real Kaizen. The most brilliant men I've ever met, and he's completely dedicated to jiu-jitsu. It's insane work ethic. They work 365 days a year. They do not take any days off. They train every day. A combination of gigantic, brilliant, and insanely dedicated with the most incredible instructor that's ever existed.
Joe calls on Danaher, one of the guys in the picture, and asks Elon, did you get a chance to talk to Danaher? In order to get Elon to come to the conclusion on his own, Joe Rogan is trying to communicate the message that MMA is an incredibly complex practice and art form. And in order to get this message across, he tells the story of a professor who dedicated his life and every waking minute to jiu-jitsu, and that even still there remain things to learn. So when he says to Elon, did you get a chance to talk to Danaher, he is indirectly asking Elon, did you get a chance to learn how incredibly complex and difficult the art of MMA is?
And he is obsessed with combat sports, warfare, like strategy.
Yeah.
Brilliant guy.
Yeah.
Brilliant.
But no,
guy.
I was impressed when I met him.
Yeah.
I mean, the things that if I was fighting someone where I was not much bigger than them, then I would be more concerned.
Joe indirectly painted the picture to Elon of just how complex MMA is, and Elon still persists in his conviction that he can beat Zuckerberg just because he's bigger than him. It is back to the drawing board for Joe, as he can't help but laugh at the absurdity of the current situation.
There's just a reason they have weight categories, you know? A friend of mine who is pretty good at fighting, but she weighs about half of what I do, and And I said, let me show you why there's weight categories in fighting. I'm just going to lie on you. I'm not going to put you in a lock or anything. I'm just going to lie on you. But I'm going to, position myself such that it's hard to get out from under me. Mm-hmm. And I'm going to lie crossways on you, and you try to get away. And you won't be able to get away. Because you couldn't.
Elon, in his intelligence, recognizes that Joe is trying to talk him out of his position. So as a rebuttal, Elon offers an anecdotal story from his personal life as to why the walrus move is really going to work. Joe clearly doesn't buy it, but we see that his response is purely nonverbal. Up until this point, Joe tried to indirectly disagree first by speaking in an intentionally non-threatening tone, then by slowing his pace and using a progressively more authoritative tone, then began asking leading questions, and then painted the picture for Elon in order to get him to understand the complexities of MMA on his own. Exhausting his indirect strategies at confrontation and getting closer and closer to a direct confrontation, Rogan employs his fifth strategy of remaining quiet and revealing his disagreement through his body language. Why do Joe's facial expressions show disagreement? Joe Rogan bites his cheek, squints his eyes, and looks upward to the right. Cheek biting can be a form of self-restraint, especially if it is done rather suddenly in response to a certain message or stimuli. Narrowing the eyes can indicate a rising contempt and distaste for what was said. Joe also looks up and to the right here as he scans his internal knowledge. Although he disagrees, he is desperately scanning for a way in which Elon's logic could work. By remaining quiet and revealing his disagreement non-verbally, Rogan gets the message across that I'm not going to call you out right now. However, the disagreement has gotten to a point where I will no longer outwardly go along with your narrative. His indirect disagreements are strategically getting more and more authoritative until eventually we end up in a direct disagreement. But when the direct disagreement finally comes, Joe is justified in it because Joe has been indirectly letting Elon know this whole time that if he keeps pushing, a direct disagreement is coming.
Like if a horse falls on you,
right?
You can get trapped under a horse.
Right, but you're not a horse. What do you weigh? About 230?
Yeah, 240. Yeah.
Yeah.
Finally, we see Joe come with the direct disagreement. Even still, though, Joe is gentle with him. After Elon agrees with him, instead of going off on a tangent in favor of his point, he only says, "Yeah," while maintaining strong eye contact. Although he makes the disagreement direct, he doesn't pursue it further. He doesn't take the lead, and he allows Elon to go back into his dialogue. Rogan's sixth and last warning to Elon is that he made the disagreement temporarily direct, for the sole purpose of showing Elon that he is comfortable taking it there if it needs to be. He is telling Elon, be careful here, because I've tried to tell you you are wrong gently in multiple different ways, and you're starting to poke the bear.
So no, I'm not a horse, but I'm saying in the limit, if something's heavy enough, like if a horse falls on you and dies, you can get trapped under a horse and not be able to get yourself out.
Right, but if someone's good enough, I mean, I'm sure you've seen like absolute weight classes in jiu-jitsu where you'll get a 145-pound competitor who strangles a 220-pound competitor, and they're both well trained.
Joe hinted to Elon that he was going to bring it there, and even still, Elon persisted. So now Joe brought it there. He is directly confronting Elon's misjudgment. We will now see that because of all the indirect warnings that Joe gave Elon up until this point, Joe begins to directly shut down any of Elon's further rebuttals, and he is justified in doing so.
Where you'll get a 145-pound competitor who strangles a 220-pound competitor, and they're both well trained. Because if someone is that
that's
good,
unlikely.
It's not unlikely. It happens quite often.
Okay.
When you get elite competitors, like elite black belts at the 145, 155-pound weight limit, you'd be shocked.
There's no more games. Joe now has to paint the picture to Elon directly. And when Elon says, that's unlikely, Joe shoots him down immediately. There is no longer a need for indirect disagreement, because Joe feels that he has already given Elon all the grace in the world. And if Elon doesn't get the message at this point, then Joe feels he needs to take the reins and directly steer Elon in the right direction. Keeping the power imbalance in mind between Joe and Elon, in the beginning, it would be disrespectful for Joe to immediately start disagreeing with Elon without first implementing his indirect strategies. But it would also be disrespectful to Elon if Joe were to turn over and just agree to everything that Elon said, because the public would come to view them both as fools. And so, after giving Elon the necessary grace, Joe feels not only justified, but that he has a duty to directly point Elon in the right direction.
I'm not saying it's impossible. It's just highly unlikely. And if this were not the case, there would not be strict weight categories in martial arts.
That is true.
Yeah.
That is true. But
Very strict
the
weight categories.
reason why they allow absolutes in jiu-jitsu is because it is the thrill of watching these smaller people go against much larger people, and sometimes they win.
The argument is now a back and forth direct disagreement. But we see Elon is not really too nervous by it. And this is because Joe gave him the grace of letting him know it was coming.
No, I just like armies, when the people take note when a small army defeats a big army because it is so unusual.
Yes.
Not because it's normal.
Right.
If it's like it was 2 against 10,000, and boy, it would beat those two guys up.
How do we know that Joe implemented the correct number of indirect strategies before turning the disagreement direct? Elon is not taken aback when Joe finally turns the disagreement direct. He feels subconsciously that Joe has earned this, and so he's not unhappy to now engage in a direct disagreement.
If you're severely outnumbered, you will lose, almost certainly.
So you would do it under any rules?
Sure.
All right, let's go. I like it. I like the fact that you're interested in doing this. It's fun. It makes it fun.
Yeah, I mean, I could, this could be an exercise in hubris.
We'll find out.
There we go. Joe has been desperately trying to get his point across to Elon this whole time. And we see Elon concede when he says, "This may be an exercise in hubris," indirectly acknowledging the strength of the arguments that Joe previously put forth. Joe lets out a bellied laugh as he reaps the fruits of his labor. Everything that he has been toiling for in this argument has finally paid off. Joe Rogan deployed 6 unique strategies to justify himself before directly confronting and disagreeing with Elon Musk. If your counterpart continues in their narrative after these strategies, then a direct disagreement and confrontation is justified. The amount of strategies that we should use before turning a disagreement direct depends entirely upon the power imbalance of both parties within the interaction. If you are on equal footing with your counterparty, you can more reliably go straight to a direct disagreement. The more power your counterparty has, the more graces you should be offering them. And if, for example, your counterparty is the richest man in the world, then you need to be as gentle and as careful as possible in your disagreement. And once you give your plethora of indirect warnings, if your counterparty keeps pushing further and further, you should feel not only justified, but committed in standing your ground and sticking up for your position, assured in the fact that you gave your counterparty ample attempts to come to the conclusion on their own. If you like this video and want to see more, like this video and subscribe because it shows me what you want to see more of. Follow the free exclusive newsletter in the description because it is worth it. My name is Glidget Ronan. Thank you so much for watching.